Welcome to the 18th episode of the Best Available Podcast. It is Monday, December 7th, 2020. Just a few weeks left in this calendar year, and then we can flip on over to 2021. I'm here with my co-host, Matt. We do not have a guest this week. We did have the chance to get Joe Buck, but we did not think he would be able to live up to Glen DeNegris, so we told him that we'd have to take a rain check and reach out again at some later time. But if you guys have not listened to our two-part conversation with Glen DeNegris, be sure to check that out. We talked about a lot. It was over 3 hours. That's why we had to split it up into two parts. And so definitely go check that out. Or as I said, or don't. I'm not your mom. You don't have to do what I tell you to do. But Matt, we're kind of coming here to the end of the NFL season. We just have a small amount of weeks left. We're kind of in that final 25% of the season for all of these teams. But before we get into that, you were telling me that you had quite the eventful morning. So we are recording this at 1:46 because Matt had some errands to run this morning. Unfortunately, he was not able to complete those errands.
Yeah, so I had a flat tire, which was just a spectacular experience. So I was driving on, I guess it was like 195 on Saturday, heard a big balloon pop. There were no balloons in my vehicle, so I guess that was the first red flag, Ryan. Didn't think much of it because I checked the tire pressure, the whole little penny, you know how you stick a penny in the groove or whatever? You can tell how much I love cars by how little I know. Looked fine or whatever, kept driving. Then this morning, as you mentioned, I had to go run some errands, wanted to beat the crowds, right? Because people are still going out and packing stores. So I wanted to beat that, go with the old people crowd in the morning kind of thing. Got on one road, and then my tire pressure light came on, which was great. Wasn't too flat to the point where I had to change it, to put on the little donut thing that only goes like 20 miles an hour. I was able to get it to a tire place right near Ryan's house. And a couple $100 later, I'm here with no car because they're still putting the tires on. Walked home. That was fun. 30 degrees out. So this is the first productive thing that I will do today. Spirit of Christmas, Ryan. I didn't get any kind of holiday deals or nothing on these tires. They stole my money, and then I got the middle of the line tires, nothing too fancy. I am sad though because these were the original tires on the car. When I got it, it was a used car, but still. So we went from my Firestones to these new tires. You're giving me a face.
You don't have the best luck, it seems like, with motor vehicles, because a couple of years ago, your engine just went kerploosh, and now you're telling me you have this tire issue. I know you've had other issues as well. I mean, are you driving this thing correctly? Are you just taking it off-roading and having like a fun time? What's going on?
Well,
here?
you're the one who loves the off-roading aspect.
I do.
For me, it was more, I don't know what happened to the engine back in 2017. That died on railroad tracks, fun fact. That's a great story for another time. But I ended up coasting it through a couple intersections. So that was very dangerous. That was a couple years ago. The tire, I was just driving and heard a pop. And I'm very good, because I drive on the turnpike a lot now, I'm very good at picking out debris on the road and avoiding it. So I guess there was like a little nail that you can't see a nail on a highway when you're going 65 miles an hour. So whatever the case is, we're just living life. $300 later, or however much it costed me. So gotta love it.
Well, I get to go to a dentist appointment tomorrow, which I am thrilled about. I'm very excited to get my teeth cleaned. How many times a day do you floss?
I floss once a day. So
okay.
You would actually be really proud of me, Ryan, because I never flossed up until I went to my dentist appointment in August. And ever since, I have flossed every day. So, do you floss multiple times a day? Is that what you're supposed to do? Or
it depends. Sometimes I'll do it once a day. Sometimes I'll do it twice a day. It kind of it depends on how I'm feeling. But I agree. It's just better to floss because when you don't floss and you go in there and you sit down in the chair, they make you feel real bad about it.
Yeah.
They make you feel like an idiot about how you're not flossing to keep and taking care of your teeth and your gums. So I agree. There was a turning point to where that just happened one too many times. They're like, I could see you're not flossing. Like, is it that obvious? So I made the conscious effort to never have to go through that again. And I'll tell you, I do feel it. I feel you feel better when you floss regularly. I don't know what it is, but you feel healthier. So if there's anyone out there that's not flossing, I know people hate it. They think it's a waste of time. They think that there's no benefits.
No, there is.
Get that.
Trust me. So once I started flossing, Ryan, you start to find things, right? So you make fun of me for my electric toothbrush, or some people did, but you can't always get the nooks and crannies there. So sometimes the floss goes in there, and then you avoid getting the plaque buildup. And, I'm trying to avoid the painful scraping, right? When you go there and they had to get the little pick and it just like hooks on the plaque. So, yeah, I agree. They do make you feel very bad about yourself when you go.
So we've had a lot of soapbox moments on this podcast since we started in August. A lot of calls to action. The call to action in today's episode is to floss every day. And with that, we're going to get into NFL Week 13. So I don't want to go through every game. I kind of want to just more focus on this from a playoff team aspect. So the Saints locked up a playoff spot in the NFC. They were the first team to do it, and now the Chiefs, I see, have apparently done it as well. But the Saints are 10-2. They are right now the number one seed in the NFC. They, with Taysom Hill still under center, they took down the Atlanta Falcons 21-16. That game was a little closer than it should have been, I think. The Falcons even had a chance late to take the lead, but they were not able to. I like what Raheem Morris has done with the Falcons since he took over for Dan Quinn. I think the team and the culture seems a lot better than it was under Dan Quinn. It seems like the team is playing hard. It doesn't seem like the team itself is very good. But Matt, we've talked about the Saints a lot this year. There was a point where we kind of questioned whether they were for real. And even to this point, you look at the NFC, I don't know if there's one team you can be 100% confident in. But the Saints right now, it looks like they are playing solid football without Drew Brees. I mean, the offense, you maybe would have liked to see them score a little bit more against a team like the Falcons, but it looks like the Saints, you take a look at their upcoming schedule, they have a really big game in 2 weeks where they play the Kansas City Chiefs. That'll be huge for both teams for playoff seeding purposes. But other than that, they have 3 winnable games, I'd say. Do you think the Saints can hold on to this number one seed, or do you think that there's another team that's going to sneak in there?
Well, after looking at what Seattle did yesterday, I think the Saints have the odds-on favorite to kind of get there. Green Bay maybe is an outside chance, but I think the big storyline for New Orleans is just how good their defense has played in the past month, right? So the start of the season, and we talked about it not only offensively but defensively, they never really played this complete football game. And this was the team, I've mentioned this before, I think I was the only one on our team during our staff picks that picked them to win the Super Bowl because they have all this depth everywhere, but we were waiting for it to kind of come to fruition. And it kind of looks like that now. And look, Taysom Hill isn't Drew Brees, but Drew Brees isn't really Drew Brees anymore, right? You don't really know what you're going to get when he comes back after fracturing however many ribs he did, right? So this is kind of going to be the new reality for New Orleans, kind of a younger, better Cam Newton aspect in terms of what Taysom Hill is being able to do. I'm not comparing Newton, current Cam Newton, not past Cam Newton, but their defense is playing really well. I agree the offense, especially with the way the Falcons have been defensively over the past couple of years, you would have liked to see more points, especially with the fact now that you have a healthy Michael Thomas. All the receivers are there for the most part. Kamara's there running around, and you would have liked to see more points, but I think this is the new reality for Saints fans. You're going to be in a lot closer games because of who's under center, but when your defense is playing like it is, you're going to have a good chance. So I still think they're the most complete team, even without a surefire quarterback under center. I still think they're the most complete team in the NFC right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that if this is going to be the year they make a run, and their window is closing because you don't know who they're going to have a quarterback after Breeze, they need to get the number 1 seed this year. That's almost a necessity because I can't see this team, for as good as they've been, going into Green Bay in late January and coming out with a W. It's just hard for me to envision that, even though I like them as a team more than I like Green Bay. But I'm glad that you brought up their defense. We talked about it early on in the season. They looked out of sync. They didn't look very good. We kind of wondered if, because they were supposed to be a good defensive unit heading into the season, and we just didn't see that. But it kind of started with that Tampa Bay game where they won 38-3. Tom Brady just couldn't get anything going. And then you look at the teams they've played recently. You can make the case that the offenses haven't been great, and I mean, that's a fair argument. They played the 49ers without any weapons. They played the Falcons twice. They played the Broncos without a quarterback. I get that, but you still need to execute the game plan and stop the other team. It's not, there's bad offenses that can put up points if a team is too lax and if they just seem like they're not really into it. But the Saints, I'll give them credit. They turn things around, and we joke about it, but we talk about teams peaking at the right time versus peaking at the wrong time. And this was a team that had 2 rough losses early in the season, but they've looked, I'm not going to say unstoppable, but they've looked very, very good recently. And as I said, outside of that Chiefs game in 2 weeks, they have a great chance to go 13-3. And I'd imagine that would be good enough for the 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, I agree. I think for them, the biggest thing is getting that home field advantage, like you mentioned, and not have to go to Green Bay. That's really the only way I could see the Packers making a run is if they get home field advantage because of where they play and how cold it gets. But I'm starting to buy in a little more on Taysom Hill, right? Because he bailed them out on a couple plays. If the play gets broken, he kind of finds his way through and gets you a couple of yards. There's not really a lot of negative plays that come with him at quarterback just because of his ability to move the ball forward. And I'm not saying Drew Brees doesn't do that, but this isn't as bad of a solution as I thought it was going to be for them. Granted, I'm still big on Jameis going in there and just letting him rip and just throw the ball down the field, but you got to give the guy credit. He's been pretty well as a starting quarterback. I don't really know how the gimmick is going to hold up in the playoffs, but we'll see. He threw his first career touchdown pass, so that's a start.
He's done better than I thought he would. I was very upset that they chose him over Jameis, but listen, I said that they haven't played the best teams, and I get that, but just as on the defensive end and the offensive end, you still have to execute the game plan, and he hasn't been the reason. I mean, they haven't lost, but he has not been the reason why they haven't performed. I mean, he's done what they've asked him to do. I'll say this. The Saints seem to make it very easy for their backup quarterbacks to just come in and do what they need to do. I mean, we saw it last year with Teddy Bridgewater, who didn't lose a game, and now we see it again this year with Taysom Hill. The things that Sean Payton is able to do there for the Saints, it's clearly... It's pretty impressive, when your future Hall of Fame quarterback goes on, just be able to insert somebody else and not really skip a beat. That's pretty impressive. But, Matt, we've talked about the Packers. They're currently the number 2 seed in the NFC at 9-3. They're coming off of a win over the Philadelphia Eagles, 30-16. A game that, as Jim and Tony said yesterday in the broadcast, it looked like it was all but over when it was 20-3 or whatever 20-3 or 23-3, excuse me. But then Jalen Hurts comes in, he throws a touchdown pass on 4th and 18 or 19 to Greg Ward, then they get a punt return, and ultimately it didn't lead to anything, but the Packers had a scare. And I kind of want to talk about this more from the home field perspective, because especially this year going into the playoffs, home field is going to be so crucial. And more than that, getting a bye is going to be huge, because with 7 teams this year, the number 2 seed has to play the number 7 seed. And You take a look right now, the number 7 seed in the NFC is the Minnesota Vikings. Maybe it could be the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe Tampa Bay somehow falls down there. But regardless, the number 2 seed isn't just taking off for a week. They have to bring their A game wild card weekend. And that could be dangerous for a team like the Packers, Matt, a team that I'm still not super high on. It's Aaron Rodgers is firmly in the MVP race. It's either going to be him or Mahomes. Wilson, unfortunately, has fallen out. So I think from an offensive perspective, they'll be fine. But they play dime a lot, and their pass rush just. I know the sack numbers are there, but it just worries me a little bit. I don't know how you feel about the Packers. They're clearly one of the best 2 teams in the NFC. I just don't know if they have what it takes to make a run. I mean, I'm more confident, I think, in the Saints than I am in the Packers.
Well, I think if you have the trio of Rodgers, Jones, and Adams all on the field healthy, I think that there's very few teams that could beat them. I mean, I also want to put this in perspective. No offense, Ryan, but I don't put too much stock into what they did yesterday because of the team they played and everything the Eagles are going through right now, especially offensively. Again, I don't mean any offense to what I say about the Eagles, but I'm not putting as much stock into this because, again, we don't really know. We never know what the Packers are. And this is dating back to when we used to do a radio show. We would go on in early January and we'd kind of be shocked over a postseason result or them falling short of a Super Bowl when we thought they were going to be there. And we just don't know. But I think Rodgers is playing at a high level. I think that, when they, again, have that trio healthy of Jones, Adams, and Rodgers, not many teams have the pure talent to kind of compete with that. And you're not going to be able to take out all 3 of those guys from the game plan. So I think that makes them pretty dangerous in that regard. But I think the Lambeau advantage in terms of playing in sub-zero temperatures definitely adds to it. But I'm not going to take too much away one way or the other from yesterday's performance.
I'll say this. I don't want to talk too much about the Eagles because they're a bad team, but it was crazy yesterday watching a quarterback on the other side of the field that actually could maneuver in the pocket and step up and get to the soft spot in the pocket and just stay calm and composed and not run into the defensive lineman or the blitzing linebacker. Just be able to just stay focused and just flick the ball away. It was like night and day. One of the Eagles beat writers tweeted this. Watching Aaron Rodgers play the quarterback position in terms of his pocket awareness and his footwork compared to Carson Wentz, it wasn't like they were playing the same position. It was like one guy was doing something completely different. But as an Eagles fan, I hope that they start Hurts for the rest of the year. If for no other reason, then it would bring some excitement to the team and the offense. Doug Peterson said that Hurts brought a spark. And I think if nothing else, they owe it to this fan base to just give us some reason to be excited over the final 4 weeks. And that's all I'm going to say about that because they play the Saints next week in the brutal stretch. God bless. So, Matt, I think the biggest surprise in the NFC this year has been the Los Angeles Rams, and they now find themselves at 8-4, 2 games out of the number 1 seed. They're just a game behind the Packers. This was a team, I'd say even midway through the season, we didn't know really what to make of this team. They had defeated all 4 NFC East teams, which clearly was not much of an accomplishment. They lost a close game to the Bills. They lost to the 49ers, and they beat a bad Bears team. But they've had, I'd say 2.5, maybe 3 impressive wins over the last 4 weeks. They beat the Seahawks at a time when the Seahawks looked like the number 1 seed in the NFC. They beat Tom Brady and the Buccaneers on the road, and now they just went into Arizona and beat them 38-28, knocking Arizona right now out of the playoff picture. The Rams, I was not high on them. I thought they were going to finish last in this division coming into the year. I thought that they were just capped out and there was no room for improvement. I thought it would just be very inconsistent all year long, but I'll give credit to McVay and to that entire coaching staff. They made a surprising move when they replaced Wade Phillips as their defensive coordinator, but their defense has been very, very good. It's been anchored by, of course, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey. I mean, everyone on that defense has looked very good, but the offense is kind of getting back to where it was 2 years ago when they made the Super Bowl. The concepts are there. Goff looks a little more confident than he did last year. And I think the Rams, they can be a very dangerous team. I mean, they're one of those teams that can sneak up on New Orleans or Green Bay in the playoffs and upset them. I think they have that potential.
Yeah, I don't know, Ryan. I think they could be a sneaky Super Bowl pick coming out of the NFC. You mentioned their defense. I think that's what really complements their offense this year. Jared Goff, I think, had a very solid day yesterday. Very nice distribution to a bunch of different guys in terms of passing the ball. He looks pretty comfortable in there. And again, you have a loss like you did with Andrew Whitworth on the offensive line and a couple other pieces moving in and out, like you mentioned, with the cap issues they have. But they're making the most out of a lot, right? And I think part of it is playing in a new stadium. I know it sounds cliche, but that turf's pretty fast, and I saw it firsthand yesterday too. So you have that working in your favor. I think they would benefit the most with the Packers from getting a higher seed and not having to go on the road, because this is traditionally not a cold weather team, but they beat a really good Arizona team yesterday, Ryan, who initially at the beginning of the year kind of looked like the favorite in this division, or at least something that could challenge Seattle. And after I would consider a bad loss to New England and then a loss at home to LA, I mean, Minnesota's not stopping for anyone right now either. So I think this is more of an indictment on Arizona, because they look kind of shaky now after a hot start.
They were the trendy team for a while there in October and early November. I bought into them even before the season. I said this team could very realistically go from worst to first, and it looked like they had an opportunity. But, yeah, it looks like they're kind of, I don't want to say falling apart, but they've lost 4 out of their last 5. And granted, I think we said, we'd have to go back and listen, but they had a 5-game stretch where they played the Dolphins, the Bills, the Seahawks, the Patriots, and the Rams. And we said, all right, well, the Cardinals have beaten teams that they should have beaten. Now we're going to see what they're really like. And they've shown us what they're really like with 4 losses out of those 5 games. Now, granted, a lot of those losses were close. They lost to the Dolphins by 3. They lost to the Seahawks by a touchdown. They lost to the Patriots by 3. However, he could make the case that if it wasn't for a crazy Hail Mary, this team might be under 500 right now. They probably would be under 500 right now. So this seems like I was kind of in on Cliff Kingsbury. Now I think I'm kind of stepping out of the room a little bit. I think that I kind of am starting to wonder how much of this offense was Cliff versus how much of it was just Kyler Murray and the talent that he brings each week, maybe going off schedule and just doing things that he's not expected to do. But now it's kind of more looking like the Cardinals might be that team that needs an extra year to kind of develop and bring everything together. Maybe next year is the year they take that step up. And I mean, they have some winnable games, right? I mean, you play the Giants and the Eagles the next 2 weeks, and then you finish with 2 divisional games. So it's not like they're out of it, but Matt, the Cardinals failing at the wrong time compared with the Vikings, who I guess we'll get into, who look dead in the water, but now have won 5 of their last 6. I can't see the Vikings not making the playoffs at this point. I know they have a very tough end to the year, but they're playing with so much confidence. It's hard to see them missing out.
Well, I think especially having a running game like they have in this time of year. We saw what Tennessee did last year with Derrick Henry. I would say this is a similar comparison to what the Titans were last year. I'm not going to say they're going to the NFC Championship game, granted, like Tennessee did last year on the other side, but you have the talent's there. You mentioned their rough start, and they're able to kind of rectify it. Yesterday, we were really kind of sitting on edge with them, though, having to go to overtime against a really bad Jacksonville team, but with a running back like they have, with a talented receiving core. They really nailed the pick with Justin Jefferson, right? Because that just immediately replaces Stephon Diggs. And you still have Adam Thielen. Whatever your opinion is on Kirk Cousins, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I think he does enough to get them in a position to win most games or some games. Depends on the game. He's very iffy, but again, their defense is playing better than it was, and I am much more confident in Minnesota than I am Arizona, Ryan. And one of the reasons is when you were talking about Arizona, I remembered when they played New England a couple weeks ago, and they're one of the most penalized teams in the NFL. And they take themselves out of a lot of close games because of penalties. In Minnesota, I don't know where they sit in terms of the penalty number, but they're a lot more consistent than this Arizona team. And I am much more confident in their ability than Arizona right now.
For the Vikings, it's time to put up or shut up at this point. I mentioned the schedule. You have a game against the Bears in 2 weeks, but you have to go to Tampa Bay, you have to go to the Saints, and then you have to end at the Lions. The way the NFC is constructed right now, the playoff picture, I don't think they need to win out to make the playoffs, but they'll probably need to win 3 of those games, I'd say, just to be safe. And I don't know. Maybe they can do it. I see 2 wins. It's where are they going to get that third one? But I'm not going to bet against Mike Zimmer. Clearly, the players like him, and they're playing hard for him as they do every year. And listen, I've been anti-Kirk for the longest time, but he's been very impressive this year. He's been one of the better quarterbacks. Quietly, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL this season. As you said, he puts them in positions to win the game. And is he in that top tier, that upper echelon? No, but he's doing what they need him to do, and he's doing it at the right time. So, listen, I think it would be cool to see Minnesota rebound from a 1-5 start to make the playoffs. I'll be rooting for him. But, Matt, the final 2 teams in the playoff picture that played this week coincidentally would actually be a first-round matchup right now if the season ended today. The Giants went into Seattle with a backup quarterback that hadn't won a game since 2014, and yet the Giants somehow pulled off one of the biggest upsets, if not the biggest upset of the year, by traveling to Seattle and beating the Seattle Seahawks, and that dropped the Seahawks to 8-4 on the year. It dropped them out of the division leading spot in the West, and now they are the 5 seed. As I said, they would play the Giants if the season ended today. The Giants, Matt, obviously the offense did not look good. The offense was rough, but this Giants defense has looked very good. Not just in recent weeks, they've looked good for pretty much the entire season. I think we kind of got ahead of this a couple weeks ago. We kind of said that the Giants, they're a solid football team. And listen, I don't know if they're going to do anything in the playoffs. Clearly, they're the best team in the NFC East. If they had Daniel Jones, they might have a chance to win out. But man, I don't know what to make of the Seattle team. You talk about teams peaking at the right time, the wrong time. They started off 5-0, but they look bad ever since that start. The defense looks atrocious. The offense doesn't look the same. Russell Wilson, he's not getting much help, but he's not doing anything to help the team regardless. The Seattle were frauds this entire time, and they hit it well for 5 weeks, but they are frauds.
Yeah, so Ryan, I don't buy the whole Russ needs help thing, right, Ryan? Because when you look at the guys who played for Seattle yesterday, Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, he's not playing with scrubs, right? So I don't really know. I'm not blaming this on Russell Wilson. I think maybe that's something in terms of the play calling, or I don't even know what, because I don't even think it's Pete Carroll's fault. I think they are something different than what we anticipated them being this year. As you mentioned, frauds. I'm leaning towards that as well. The defense is bad, but I would argue the offense in recent weeks has been a bigger issue. Granted, you don't have Chris Carson for a couple of those weeks, but we talked about it back in October when I went through the amount of points they scored on that 5-game winning streak to begin the year: 38, 35, 38, 31, 27. And after probably the game against Buffalo, when they scored 34, then it goes to 16, 28, 23, and then 12. So it's starting to drop, not consistently, but at a pretty considerable rate. So I don't really, it's kind of confusing in a lot of ways as to how this happened for Seattle. I think this could be a one-and-done team in the playoffs. I really do. They got outplayed by a 5-7 football team yesterday. So I don't really expect that to happen for a Super Bowl favorite like we were all kind of crowning them 2 months ago. I don't think it's Russ's fault. Again, I want to preface with that. We have to be fair here. It's not like he's playing with scrubs.
I think it's a very, very small part, I think, is Russ's fault. Very, very small. I think the offensive line is a big issue. But I think the bigger issue is the coaching. I know Pete Carroll, people kind of like to put him up on a pedestal. Some of the things he says and some of the things he does throughout the course of a game, they blow my mind. And he's been doing it for years. It doesn't seem like he's really analytically minded, which I guess isn't too surprising. They are number 2 in most expected win probability loss by bad decisions to kick on 4th down instead of going for it. So this team, it's weird because they have an elite quarterback. This team is so conservative not just on 4th downs, but all throughout the game they play conservatively. And I'll say this because they just played the Eagles last week on Monday night. They did not impress me at all. And you have to remember, they're going up against a very bad Philadelphia Eagles team. And they looked bad against the Eagles. So I agree. I think they're one and done. I can't see them beating any of the teams that they might have to play. I can't see them beating the Giants right now if the Giants end up winning the division. If they fall down to the 6th seed, I can't see them beating the Rams or the Packers. They're not a good football team. They were lucky to get 5 wins early in the year to lock up their playoff spot, because then they just had to win a few games down the stretch. But they're not a good team.
To expand on your NFC East point, Ryan, so they played 3 out of 4 teams in the NFC East, all of them in one possession. You give up 31 points to the Cowboys early on in the year. Granted, that was still with Dak Prescott, but take that as you will. Then you're in a one-possession game, as you mentioned, a couple days ago on Monday Night Football, and then yesterday with the Giants. So I mean, when you compare it to the real bottom of the NFC, which is what the NFC East is, and you're playing all one-possession games, that's a red flag for me. They have a chance to rectify it, Ryan, though. You get the Jets in Washington over the next 2 weeks, but I mean, I don't think Washington's a pushover anymore, especially with the way Seattle's playing. I mean, I could see a scenario. I mean, what helps is they started the season 5-0, but I mean, San Francisco's starting to get a little healthy and hot, Ryan. I mean, you have the NFC East teams playing better. Arizona, we don't know what they are. There's still some room to drop for them. There really is. I think the Rams are the best team in that division, and I think I can confidently say that.
Matt, before we move on from the NFC, your Detroit Lions are still in the hunt, especially with the loss, Arizona's loss, and Minnesota's win. The Lions are 1 game out in the NFC. Not going to make the playoffs. They have to play Green Bay, Tennessee, Tampa Bay, and Minnesota, but they're in the hunt. They looked a lot better yesterday. Of course, under new head coach Darrell Bevell, after Matt Patricia was finally let go. And I see here Michael Rothstein wrote an article about how the Lions players saw an immediate difference in Bevell's approach and style, music and fun all the time. I think that's what you need. Clearly, we saw the reaction after Patricia got fired. The Lions players did not like Matt Patricia. So I'm glad that at least for the final 4 weeks of the season, they can have some fun. Listen, you said that you think they'd be in the hunt in December, and they're in the hunt. They could very well finish. They could maybe get up to the 9 seed, 8 seed if things go well. But congratulations, Matt. As a lifelong Lions fan, you must be thrilled.
Ryan, as I've told you before, the In the Hunt graphic has been made for very few teams. The Lions, the Bears, and the Raiders. Those are the 3 teams you will always see on the In the Hunt graphic in December. And none of those teams, traditionally, I say this because Zach's Raiders are in the hunt and might make the playoffs, traditionally, they miss out. So that's why I say they're in the hunt all the time. I mean, they're not a bad football team. I said this when we did our preview. I mean, they have the talent. It was just Patricia's just kind of a mean dude, right? What does it say about the culture in the locker room when Darius Slay goes to Philadelphia and all of his former teammates on Detroit are happy for the guy that he got out and they're waiting for their opportunity? That should be the biggest red flag, more red than this quarter zip that I'm wearing right now, as to it's a Matt Patricia thing and not a player thing. So that's all I got to say about that. Detroit, I think, will be in a very good spot next year in going forward. So they'll be there eventually.
Well, you brought up the Raiders, so let's move on to the AFC. The Steelers play, as we record this, in a few hours against Washington, so they have not played yet this week. The Chiefs right now, they have locked up a playoff spot. Right now is the number 2 seed at 11-1. They played a very close game against the Denver Broncos, who had a quarterback this week. Early on, it seemed like they didn't have a quarterback because Drew Lock looked awful, but the Broncos kept it close. They lost again. The Chiefs only put up 22 points. It was not a result that many were expecting. I think that the Chiefs were 13-point favorites heading into the game. But the Chiefs, they did what they needed to do. It was ugly, but they won. They're still in contention for that number 1 seed. It's kind of crazy that we could have 2 undefeated teams right now in the AFC if the Chiefs didn't fall to the Raiders in Week 5, but Matt, I like the Chiefs more than the Steelers. They're my pick right now in the AFC. Based on what I've seen this year, I'm not going to bet against Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes. But I really would have liked to have seen a more convincing performance against a Denver team last night.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me. I mean, you mentioned Drew Lock and the way he played, but really the only reason they were still in it is because of what Melvin Gordon did on the ground to be able to kind of keep the ball moving. Mahomes made the throws he had to make. As you mentioned, I agree. It wasn't convincing, but I've always said this. You've said this too. Good teams win the games they're supposed to win and just move on. And, Kansas City did that. It's not a great look seeing them play like that on a national televised game, but Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes know how to get it done. I think we're on our way towards a Kansas City Pittsburgh AFC title game, which I think will be great because they've played some really good games in the past in recent years, even with Alex Smith under center too. So it should bode well for an exciting postseason, but you're not going to blow out every team every week. I'll say that.
So the Bills did not play yet. They played tonight in the Monday night game against San Francisco. They right now are the 3 seed at 8-3. The Titans and the Browns are the 4 and the 5 seeds. This was maybe the biggest surprise for me of all the results yesterday. Cleveland shot out to a 38-7 lead prior to halftime. And then in the second half, the Titans finally started scoring some touchdowns. It didn't really matter. They made it a one-score game at the end, but there was no time left. I don't really count that. Baker Mayfield fumbled on a QB sneak. They gave him the ball back and let them score again. It didn't matter. The Browns looked good. and they look better than I would have even expected. I thought Tennessee was going to handle them pretty well because, I don't know. I look at the Browns. I've talked them up all year long, but they're not an. I didn't think they were an 8-3 team. I thought that they could be a playoff team, but I didn't think that their record correctly identified the type of team that they were. But then you see them do something like this, where they go into Tennessee and they beat the Titans are a good football team. They've had some ups and downs this year, but they're a good team in my opinion. So go into Tennessee and throttle them for the most part. The final score is not indicative, but Matt, this Cleveland team, number one, this is their first winning record since 2007, I think. But this is a team that after 2 losses in 3 games to the Steelers and the Raiders, they've won 4 in a row. Granted, those teams that they played outside of Tennessee weren't good, but Matt, Cleveland, I could, if depending on who they play, I could see them maybe win a playoff game. I could see them win Wild Card Weekend. But I think now it's very clear that they're going to be in the playoffs. They've built up a nice cushion. It's very hard to see them missing out now.
Yeah, you nailed this prediction, Ryan. I was very anti-Cleveland for months, and you were right. I will admit. I think Tennessee. You're a little more confident in Tennessee than I am. This is exactly like the way they played against Pittsburgh. I remember when it was. I think it was the battle of the undefeateds back in October. And Pittsburgh ran up the score early. Tennessee kind of came knocking on the door late. I think it's the same thing here. I'm close to using the F word with the Titans in terms of being competitive for a Super Bowl. Cleveland, the way they play. Listen, I was very anti-Baker. He looked really good for a majority of yesterday. They could definitely win a playoff game. You know what? I almost think it's better, Ryan, that the Steelers are going to win that division, and then next year maybe Cleveland can win it. So then that way there will be fans in the stands packed up in that stadium, Ryan, because those fans deserve it, right? So it's almost in a way, Mother Nature kind of moving that 1 year back, so that way those fans can enjoy a first home playoff game at full capacity, right? Hopefully if we get to that point, but regardless, they can make some noise. I was very wrong about Cleveland. You were very right. And they're definitely exciting to watch. I was surprised in a good way by the way they played yesterday.
Another team that's been exciting to watch this year, Matt, is the Miami Dolphins. They had a home game against the Bengals, and the Bengals scored 7 points in the first quarter and could not find the end zone again for the rest of the game. The defense for the Dolphins shut them down. Tyler Boyd had the long touchdown reception. I think it was 72 yards, which was good for me. That was his only reception of the game, and I started him in fantasy in a game that I needed to win, and I did. So there were some ejections in this game. There were a lot of tempers flaring. Brandon Allen had to leave the game in the fourth quarter due to a chest injury, so we got to see Ryan Finley throw the ball, which was just so much fun. But the Dolphins improved to 8-4. Brian Flores is further solidifying his case for Coach of the Year. He looks to be the best disciple of the Bill Belichick coaching tree. The players seem to love playing for him. The team seems to be in a great place mentally. They seem to have a lot of momentum. At 8-4, they are the 6th seed right now in the AFC, but I think that the Dolphins are also a pretty safe bet to make the playoffs. They do have some tough games coming up, but I still think that they can squeak in. I don't know if they would. I don't see them the same as the Browns. I don't think Miami wins a playoff game this year, but I think just getting there and just getting that experience for a lot of their young guys, I think that'll be huge for the next 2 or 3 years.
So I think there are a lot of things to unpack here for me for Miami. First, you look at their upcoming schedule. There's a realistic chance they could lose 3 out of their last 4, maybe even all 4, by the end of the year. I don't think it's unfair to say Kansas City, New England, Vegas, Buffalo, those are really hard games, especially for a rookie quarterback. Not saying they're going to lose them all. Not saying they're a bad team. I'm just throwing it out there. that if there is a team, Ryan, that can maybe fall out of this AFC playoff picture, I think Miami would be at the top of that list. And with that being said, if you remember a couple of years ago when the Patriots won the Super Bowl and they held the Rams to 3 points, that Rams offense was one of the best in the league, scoring upwards of 30 points a game or almost, or just running through the NFC. That defense held them to 3 points. Brian Flores basically just took that and brought it to Miami. It's the same thing. And they are one of the best defenses in the NFL, and I agree, he's the best of the Belichick coaching tree in terms of just instant success. And I don't look at record last year. I look at the way they finished the year and the way they played throughout this year. So I think they still have the inside track to the postseason, Ryan, but if there is a team that could fall out, it's because of their schedule that they have coming up.
It's definitely possible. You look at their schedule; it's very unlikely they beat the Chiefs. They will be at home, but it's still very unlikely. So that drops them to 8-5, and then you have a game against the Patriots, who I'll let you talk about the Patriots in a second, but they seem invigorated recently. They seem like they're playing better. You have to go to the Raiders day after Christmas, and then you finish off against the Bills. Those are all very tough games. Those are all against teams that are either in the playoff race or in the hunt. So it's not going to be easy for them, but if nothing else, I think this will be a good way to... This almost strikes me as these last 4 games are their playoffs. And if they do get in, they're just going to be... They're one of those teams that'll just be happy to be there, and we'll hear more from them in the coming years. But this will be a really interesting stretch for this team. I'm excited to see how they respond because I'm sure, we're not the only ones that think that they could potentially lose their playoff spots. So I'm sure they're going to use something like that as motivation. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. The final team right now in the AFC playoff picture is the Indianapolis Colts, who had a game this week against the Houston Texans, and they won 26-20. The Texans have looked very good since they fired Bill O'Brien. If it wasn't for their tough start to the season, they'd probably be in the playoff race. Unfortunately, they just had a really tough start to their schedule, and they couldn't overcome it. I'm not really sold on the Colts as much as I am about other teams in the AFC. I think that's what it is. It's just there's so many other better teams in the AFC. I think the Colts, as they are a good team. I find it hard to believe that they're going to be competitive against these other teams that are ahead of them. But I think that it is impressive with a guy in Phillip Rivers who a lot of people thought was down for the count. He's looked respectable at the very least over the past several weeks, and he's put them in a solid position. I mean, they're another team that could maybe fall out of the playoff picture. I mean, you look at their upcoming schedule, I see 2 games that they could lose, maybe 3 games. But at the same time, they've put themselves in the position they needed to put themselves in, and I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, so apparently Phillip Rivers is dealing with some kind of major turf toe kind of thing where he's going to play through it. I was a big Phillip Rivers doubter coming into this season. So I will admit he is playing better than I expected him to, and better than I thought he would after seeing him the first couple weeks of the season. Their schedule is a little tough. I think when you have a guy in Phillip Rivers, though, Ryan, that gives you the edge over a team with a rookie quarterback in Miami, just for the sheer factor that he's going to put you in somewhat good positions to win. I don't think his track record in San Diego/LA really kind of puts the bill forward on that. I think he's a really solid quarterback. It'll be a good mile marker when they play Pittsburgh Week 16. I agree with the Houston aspect, though, Ryan. And I said this when they beat the Patriots a couple weeks ago. They're a good team. And they took Indy down to the wire without having really any of their receivers, right? Because Fuller had PED suspension. They cut Kenny Stills, I think. Randall Cobb's on IR. Brandon Cooks got concussed halfway through the game. So they're still finding ways to be competitive, and I think that's really speaks miles for how good Deshaun Watson is as a quarterback.
Yeah, I like Watson a lot. I did not like him coming out of college. I thought that he was not going to, I thought that he didn't have what it took to be a good NFL quarterback, but he's proven me wrong year in and year out. And I'm excited to see what he can do next year with presumably a new head coach and a new coaching staff and maybe some better weapons around him, some more consistent weapons, maybe would be a better way to put it. I'm excited to see what that team can do next year. But yeah, I mean, if you're a Texans fan, this is all that you could have hoped for. You just your team to be competitive down the stretch, even if maybe they're not winning a lot of games. But I think that if you're a Texans fan, there's reasons to be hopeful for the future. The Raiders almost suffered a catastrophic loss, which would have been detrimental majorly to their playoff hopes. But instead, the Jets ran a cover zero on 3rd and 10, and give credit to Derek Carr because he noticed Henry Ruggs streaking down the sideline one-on-one, and they got a touchdown with just seconds remaining, and they avoided what would have been the biggest upset of the year. They beat the Jets 31-28. Matt, I'm not sold on this Raiders team as much as I was a couple weeks ago. I think I talked them up a lot, and now I kind of regret doing that. I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs. Right now, they're a game out. I just don't think they can climb back in. I think I drank a little too much of the Kool-Aid. I think I drank too much of the John Gruden Kool-Aid. I think that he's still, he's still the right option for them, but I don't think that this is their year. Clearly, they have a lot of holes to fill on that team still. I think it's going to be another year before they're really ready to take that next step.
Yeah, so this is almost like the Sam Darnold audition for a new team, right? Because we're at the point where it's Trevor Lawrence is going to be a Jet, or if he goes back for another year, which would really be something at Clemson. But I'm viewing this as Darnold really kind of just auditioning himself to other teams to be a viable guy. And he's been, thrown around with a couple of the other teams in the AFC that kind of need a quarterback, including a team we'll talk about in a second. But, I mean, listen, running the cover zero got him fired the next day, Greg Williams, right? And we're kind of at this point with the Jets where it's really blatantly obvious they're trying to get Trevor Lawrence. It's no guarantee you're going to get him, and they almost won the game. But I thought Darnold wasn't bad yesterday, right? Like, he made some good throws. He put him in a position to win against a playoff caliber team. I'm not going to be too hard on Sam Darnold, as much as this is one of my New Year's resolutions, Ryan, is to not say that Sam Darnold is absolute garbage. He played well enough yesterday to put them in a position to win. And I think he's in a position now where he needs to start showing teams that he could be a starting option in a better system. So look for better play out of him going down the stretch of this season.
Some team is going to get him as a reclamation project for very cheap, and they are going to be very happy with the results that they get. I don't know what team that is, but I still think he could be a good NFL quarterback. He just needs he needs to go to a different team. But I think that he's going to be a good option for whoever gets him. Matt, your Patriots, before we end this NFL talk, are in the hunt. We've said in the hunt a lot. That's the phrase of the day, is in the hunt. The Patriots won again, and not only did they win, they gave the Chargers the worst home shutout loss since, I think, 1989, I think. 45-0. I told you on Saturday night that's just something about the Patriots and the Chargers. I thought that Bill would have something up his sleeve for Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense, and I guess that he did because the Chargers could not find a way to score any points. The Patriots at 6-6 are 2 games out, but the odds of this happening, I'll admit, are low. But I could see a scenario where the Patriots win out and somehow make the playoffs. I don't think it's that far-fetched.
Yeah, so I think And I said this when they lost, or at least I thought this when they lost to the Texans, that might have been one game too many that they lost, right? Because that put it at almost you have to win out. If they would have beaten Houston, you can afford a loss in these final 4 games and still be in a spot to compete for a playoff berth. You know, everyone's going to say, well, Cam Newton only threw for like 69 yards yesterday and didn't really do much and whatever. You're winning football games. I'll take whatever I can get at this point. Special teams, the Chargers are absolutely awful at. I mean, you have the blocked field goal, you have the punt return touchdown, another couple big punt returns. I mean, for a majority of the first half, Ryan, and even in parts of the second half, the Patriots were starting over midfield for almost every single drive. And even on the opening drive, they made the Chargers defense look silly. And this is a team in New England that was such a bad first quarter and really first half team in terms of offensive production, and they put up 28 points. I mean, granted, a couple of those came on special teams, but regardless, they were scoring points. And I think we got to sit there and say, you know, take the stats out of the picture and just look at the fact that they won a game. They're in a position to be competitive. I want to say for all of our friends that might try and roast me for saying this, I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but it's not out of the question. Because you look at the Patriots' upcoming schedule, Ryan, and, you know, a tough game against the Rams, but it's in the same building you just played at. Then you play a team in Miami with a rookie quarterback, and we know how Bill kind of fares against a rookie quarterback, and we saw what he did to one yesterday in L.A. Then you play a team in Buffalo that you should have beaten the first time around, and then you end the season with the Jets. So I think there is a chance. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's going to make me watch the games. So I'm happy for that, and I think everyone in the Patriots fan base should be as well. Is Cam Newton a guy? Who knows? But we have a reason to watch in December, and I am thankful for that. So there we are. That's my piece on the Patriots.
I like their chances more than the Raiders. You mentioned their upcoming schedule, but I thought the narrative surrounding the Patriots was that, oh, Bill is just going to tank so he can get Trevor Lawrence or some other good quarterback. That's not in his DNA. Bill's not going to blatantly try to lose games. He was going to try to win as many games as he could this year. And I think with the team that he has at his disposal, it is beyond impressive that they are 500 right now. This is an offense that clearly we have not really seen the Patriots use before. We've never seen a Patriots quarterback throw for 60 yards in a game. That was never really the game plan, but with what he has at his disposal on the offensive end and on the defensive end, the defense has been a big flaw this year for a number of reasons, but I think it's very impressive that he has this team at 500 in the hunt. I think that alone should... I don't know if people don't respect Belichick at this point. I don't know if people thought that Tom carried him to all his success, but that alone should make you respect Bill, if nothing else.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been a big Bill guy for a long time, and it's definitely reason to be optimistic. And the offense, yeah, Ryan, it's going to be – it's not fun to watch week to week, but they've been playing better. It's very encouraging for sure. And, you know, I think the fan base just has to kind of be happy about it. Like, Tom's not going to walk back through the door. I think Cam Newton's probably the best option you got right now. You found a really good running back in Damian Harris. So it's encouraging for sure. And I still think, though, they lost one too many games early on in the year. If they would have pulled one out against Buffalo or Denver. But I will say this, Ryan, out of the teams that are in the hunt, right, Vegas, Baltimore, and Miami, will throw them in there. They have the tiebreaker over all three of those teams. So that could come in handy down the stretch. They beat Baltimore, they beat Vegas, and they still have one more against Miami, but they're in a great position with all those tiebreakers. No other team could say that they have that. So if it really came down to it, that can account for the margin of error that was lost by that Texans game a couple weeks ago.
All right, well, that was our talk about the NFL in Week 13. As we alluded to, there are still going to be two more games. We have Washington and Pittsburgh. We have San Francisco and Buffalo, and then we have Baltimore at Dallas tomorrow, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure, but we have 3 more games this week, and then we can move on to the final 4 weeks of the NFL season. And there's going to be a lot of fun playoff races for sure. Taking a look at the schedule for next week, just an early look. Fox's game of the week, New Orleans at Philadelphia. I'm sure that they're thrilled about that. Maybe if Jalen Hurts starts, it could be entertaining. Other than that, you have Minnesota, Tampa Bay should be interesting. The Cardinals and the Giants, surprisingly, will be interesting. Kansas City, Miami, as we talked about a little bit earlier. Your Patriots are getting to travel to Los Angeles, which should be fun. And Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh at Buffalo. So pretty good slate. I'm looking forward to it. But Matt, are there other sports you would like to talk about? Of course, we're in a kind of period now. Normally we'd have other things to talk about, but right now it's kind of just football. There's college basketball going on and college football. Hockey may be back in the middle of January. It might not. There might not be a season. Nobody knows. Baseball, the offseason, as expected, is going pretty slowly. The top free agents are still out there. No really big. Actually, the Phillies made a big move. They picked up Ian Hamilton off of waiver, so that was their big addition for the offseason because they don't have any money. They lost $2 billion. So I guess we could talk about college basketball because we had a college basketball expert on last week, but we didn't talk about it a lot. There's been a lot of upsets so far this season through the first couple of weeks, and even just yesterday I saw that Georgia Tech upended Kentucky pretty convincingly. So, Matt, I'm going to let you talk about what you want to talk about. Unfortunately, we did not get to see Gonzaga at Baylor. That had to be moved to a different day because of COVID. But there's been a lot of fun action so far throughout the first couple weeks of the season at all levels. So what are your takeaways so far?
Yeah, I was really looking forward to that Gonzaga-Baylor matchup, but as 2020 has alluded, you can't really look ahead of the next day. But in any case, they'll run that back at some point in the season. Gonzaga's next game back slated to be Iowa, who was number 3 in the country. So we won't get number 1 versus number 2, but we'll get number 1 versus number 3. So there's a positive to come out of anything. But you mentioned Kentucky yesterday. They do not look good. But I will say this, Calipari's teams are always young, they're always new, and they usually kind of come into full form, midseason form when it gets time for March. So I'm not too worried about them just yet, but I think what's going to hurt Calipari in that regard is not having a summer, not really having a full camp, being kind of limited with COVID. So that'll be tough for them to overcome. I thought Baylor looked really good against Illinois a couple nights ago. As you know, I'm very high on Illinois and Ayo Dosunmu and everyone else that Brad Underwood has in that squad. Creighton came back from a COVID stint, racked up 3 wins, but their big challenge, Ryan, will be tomorrow. We're recording this Monday, so on Tuesday, they're going to play Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. So number 5, there's number 8. That'll be really exciting. Your Wildcats, Ryan, of Villanova, looked very good yesterday at Texas. So a lot of ranked matchups early and a lot of fun ACC Big Ten Challenge over the next 2 days. So that'll be really fun, Tuesday and Wednesday. A lot of good ranked matchups.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking at the schedule coming up, you mentioned Creighton at Kansas. You have North Carolina at Iowa, Illinois at Duke, Syracuse at Rutgers, Ohio State at Notre Dame. Should be interesting to watch. And then the next day, Indiana at Florida State, Oklahoma at Xavier, Georgia Tech coming off that Kentucky win, going up against Nebraska. You have Maryland at Clemson. So there's some good games coming up for sure. For those of you that don't have anything else to watch, maybe check those out. Even on December 10th, which is Thursday, there's an interesting game with San Diego State at Arizona State. That might be kind of fun to watch and see what happens. I was personally excited to see DePaul play because of the connection with Ray Salnave. Unfortunately, they were not able to get on the court because of 2020, but they are scheduled to play this Friday at 4:30 p.m. against Seton Hall. So that'll be exciting to watch. But yeah, there's definitely some good games coming up, good games that have happened so far. Matt, you as a day one Major League Soccer fan, the season is almost over. My Philadelphia Union lost in round number one, so Dr. Matt Harmon was correct in not naming the Philadelphia Union as the team to beat. New England ended up making an incredible run until they lost to the Columbus Crew yesterday. They lost 1-0, so Columbus has now moved on to the MLS final, and they will play the winner of Minnesota and Seattle. That game is tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. So, Matt, obviously the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference getting as far as they did was surprising, but what other surprises did you see throughout the course of these playoffs?
I can't say I watched too much of them. As a day one soccer, can't say I watched too much, especially, Major League Soccer doesn't usually coincide with the first week of college basketball. They're usually staggered a little more. But the Revolution run was pretty surprising because, in some regards, because Bruce Arena coming in, everyone kind of knew that he was going to kind of rebuild this team, but no one really expected them to fall as low as 8 this year. They were picked to be kind of a middle of the road, middle of the pack team in the Eastern Conference. Fell pretty far in terms of the playoff standings, but made a really good run. So as a day one Revolution fan, it was really cool to see. But Columbus, really solid team, and both teams in the West are really good too. Minnesota is a sneaky good postseason team, or at least whenever they get into a tournament, they had a lot of success in the U.S. Open Cup as well in past years. So they know how to win when it matters. But if you're asking me for a pick, Ryan, I'm going to stick with the chalk and pick Seattle. Proven winners. Unlike their football counterparts right now, they are not frauds. So that's why I talk in soccer, considering I have not watched as much as I used to.
Yeah, one Seattle football team is more of a fraud than the other Seattle football team. I was watching some Formula One yesterday. The race started at an acceptable hour. It did not start at like 7 or 9. It started at a little after noon, which was cool. It had an interesting podium. Sergio Perez got his first win. Took him 190 races, but he finally got there and got the W. It looked like Mercedes car is going to win. George Russell was in front for a lot of it, but they had some pit issues late. But Formula One is a lot of fun. I've talked up NASCAR since we started this podcast back in August, on August 17th. But if you're looking for another motorsport to get into, Formula One is always fun. I definitely recommend it. Their season's almost over. They have one final race. It's Abu Dhabi. The champion is actually already crowned. It was Lewis Hamilton. They was crowned, I guess, a week or two ago. But it's still a lot of fun to watch, and hopefully next year things can kind of start getting back to normal. But yeah, that was our potpourri of sports topics before we get into the ever popular segment on this podcast, Disney Plus and Glen. And this week's movie of choice was Big Hero 6. And this was a 2014 film. And so we talked about it a little bit last week. Robotics prodigy Hiro lives in the city of San Francisco next to his older brother Tadashi. Rest in peace. Spoilers, Hiro's closest companion is Baymax, a robot whose sole purpose is to take care of people. When a devastating turn of events throws Hiro into the middle of a dangerous plot, he transforms Baymax and his other friends Gogo, Tamago, Wasabi, Honey Lemon, and Fred into a band of high-tech heroes directed by Don Hall and Chris Williams. So this was a good film. It was not my favorite, but it was. I think I was looking at my watch list last night. I think I would put this ahead of Frozen. So I think I have Coco, I have Frozen 2, I have Moana, and then I think I would put Big Hero 6. I enjoy it, so I know parts of it are obviously unrealistic, but I'm a comm major, so I'm not smart enough to understand a bunch of science and physics and robotics and stuff, but I thought that focusing a movie on that was was pretty interesting. I kind of liked that a lot. I thought visually the movie was very appealing. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a nice feel good movie when all was said and done. As I said, Tadashi died very early on. That was the thing I had the problem with, how just everything went well and then suddenly just a building caught on fire. Not to sound like a movie snob, but it just seemed like that just happened way too quickly. There was no build up. So other than that, I enjoyed the movie. So Glenn, once again, good job. Matt, what did you think of it?
Yeah, so the man in the mask, again, spoilers, ended up being the professor, which was a nice little twist. We all thought it was going to be the tech billionaire guy who takes advantage of people's inventions. Um, there's, I speculated for a second it might have been Tadashi too in the mask. I don't know why, but I was expecting. I did not really think they were going to go with the obvious choice of the tech guy who everyone thought was behind the mask. But the professor was a nice little twist in there. That he was just trying to bring his daughter back. I thought Baymax was the best character in the film. Loved him and his one-liners. Overall, good movie. Tadashi would probably be my second favorite character from the film, so I was very upset when they killed him off, as you said, very abruptly. Thought he deserved better than that, but very, very good movie. I would agree with your hierarchy as well. For me, it would probably rank fourth on the list. A little bit better than Frozen. So I read on Twitter that Glenn is watching Frozen right now, I think, for $5. So, Glenn, I hope you're enjoying Frozen and the trip to Arendelle. But overall, it's a pretty solid film. So I'm excited for next week.
Yeah, we have to decide what movie to watch. Glenn gave us a list. I mean, there's so many possibilities. I mean, this is something that can go on for a very long time. Even just the animated movies, this could all go on for years. I don't know about you. There are a lot of animated movies on this list that I have never seen. As I said, mostly the newer ones. Like I haven't seen the newest Toy Stories. I did not see 3 or 4. Wreck-It Ralph, Zootopia.
You haven't seen Zootopia?
No.
Great film.
Going through the list here. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of these. So, I mean, we'll have options for a while. Of course, you will be starting your Jersey Shore watch through any day. So that'll be another thing that we can talk about. That's not just Disney. It is something else. But yeah, this was I enjoyed the movie a lot. I've enjoyed every movie that Glenn has recommended, and we will wait to see what we talk about next time. So, I think that's it. I don't think I'm forgetting anything.
Does anything pop your tarts, Ryan? For me, it would be tires. That would be my pops my tarts.
Yeah, I can't say that anything really does. No. Actually, because I have a dentist appointment tomorrow, I hate the feeling, as you said, of the pick just in between your teeth. I hate it. I've never liked it, but hopefully it's just a easy in and easy out for me tomorrow. Hopefully I don't have to be there for too long, and everything turns out okay. We started the show talking about flossing, and that's how we're going to end the show, I guess. Just remember to floss. Your dentist will thank you. So that was Best Available Podcast, episode 18. We have 3 more episodes this year, and then we will move on to 2021, which is crazy to say. Be sure to check out our website, bestavailableplayer.com. We just started a collaboration with South Jersey Sports Zone, which was co-founded in 2017 by one of our writers, Kevin Emmons, and he focuses on South Jersey high school sports and South Jersey pride. And I've enjoyed reading his work dating back to when he wrote for the Burlington County Times and everything else. And the things that he's been able to do with South Jersey Sports Zone are impressive. So be sure to check that article out. It is now on the website. He put a lot of work, a lot of effort into it. We're going to have more of it. More coming soon with South Jersey Sports Zone. We're very excited for this collaboration. When we started Best Available Player, we had discussed having a high school sports component, and obviously that got derailed because it was not very easy to just travel to different high schools and get in because of COVID. But hopefully next year, when things start to get a little better, we'll be able to do that a little more. But for right now, Kevin's got us covered. So thank you, Kevin. We had multiple podcast episodes today. In addition to this one, we had a new Jabber Days episode, and that was announced that Justin is now streaming on Twitch. So he is a pro Twitch streamer. So be sure to go to their Instagram page, our Instagram page, and to his Twitch page, which is twitch.tv/xghostbot, and the O in bot is a 0, and help him reach 50 followers. So he needs to reach it by January to become a Twitch affiliate. I checked, and he was at 20, so we can get him there. We have, through the power, they said through the power of Jabber Days, we'll say through the power of Best Available Player in general, we will be able to get Justin to 50 followers and help him become a Twitch affiliate. We have created a Twitch channel as well, so wink, wink. Stay tuned for that. Had a new Halper Bros episode today as well, so be sure to check that out. A lot of new articles on the site, a lot of new articles coming throughout the rest of the year. We're close to 200 posts. And yeah, I think I got everything. Did I miss anything? I think that was everything.
Yeah, you got everything. Busy Monday for Best Available Player.
Yes, it is. So I want to thank you all for listening, and we will catch you all again next week.